The Doom Patrol is finally back after almost a year hiatus. The last time I made a video for this was back in January. I think this is literally the longest time I've ever watched a show where it almost took an entire year to come back after the mid-season final. But I am so glad it's finally back so we can see these weird and wacky characters do some interesting things on screen and also just wrap up the story for the fourth and final season of the show. However, for me at least, it didn't feel like it was that long of the gap after I started watching the episode. I was able to get pulled right back into it and it didn't feel like I missed much. There were a couple things that I kind of forgot, but I got refreshed as I was watching the episode. And this video is probably going to be a little bit longer because we are going to be covering episode 7 and episode 8, but I am looking forward to diving deep into the plot, how these characters developed, because they definitely developed a lot in only 2 episodes and pretty much showing more of their trauma, how they need to deal with it, and how they need to move past it to kind of be the heroes they should be. So let's jump into the review section for both episodes, and then we'll go into the episode 7 breakdown and then episode 8. So when we jump into the review section of this, one major theme I noticed through both episodes was self-reflection. These characters trying to move past the pain they had and try to be better people, but at the same time, some of the characters kind of stuck in their way and needing that kind of push out the door to get where they need to go. Like with Rita and Madame Rouge. Rita is in self-pity mode. She hates her life, everything's failing. She doesn't really want to do anything about it. But Madame Rouge is so used to always gone wrong. She'd rather fail at trying rather than just succeeding at doing nothing, which I think speaks a lot to show this villain who's trying to be better. She's trying to be a good person. She's trying to make up for the bad things she's caused and be a better person overall, especially a better friend to Rita. And I like how she's the one to help Rita kind of come back to reality. Like, okay, we got to do this. We got to save our friends. And I think that theme really played well in this episode. But on the other hand, you have Cliff, who's in the opposite of self-reflection, where instead of kind of going over what he's gone wrong in his life and trying to move past and be a better person, he's still thinking super selfishly and being self-sabotaging because of how he's dealing with his trauma, where he's losing his longevity, kind of focusing on, oh, I want to do this for my grandson, but putting it more in a selfish way rather than trying to be a good person. He's like, no, I want to do this. I want to do this. Where he's not letting people help him as either, even with the Parkinson's and everything else coming out, which Cliff has a lot to grow. He always does. And I was hoping he was going in that direction. I think by the end of the season, he will. But I do feel like it's probably leading to like a self-sacrificing arc where Cliff does something selfless, saves his friends, but ends up losing his life in the process. At least I think that's what's going to be happening with Immortus. And speaking of Immortus, the reveal was really interesting, just having that big shocking moment, but I don't want to talk about it just yet. And I really like what they did because it definitely doesn't fit with the comic book version of the character, but the comic book version isn't super well known anyways, so I don't think it matters too much. However, the character, the way they set her up, it definitely fit within the show's realm of possibilities and fit the theme of everything going on. And on top of everything going on as well, Vic also had a very great moment with Derek, kind of having 2 friends reconnect and having them realize why they haven't been in each other's lives as much, but also Derek kind of giving Vic the push back to being a hero, being like, hey, you love this shit, you should get back into it, where you don't need to be the same old Cyborg, you can be a new version of the hero. So he can still be Cyborg, just not the way he once was. So I really like what they hinted in this, because they also definitely hinted that Cyborg is going to go on to a different team, for example, which would have been Titans, I would assume, if that show kept going on. But they definitely set up some cool stuff, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where these characters go. Doom Patrol just ends up continuously being this weird and ridiculous show, which is so much fun watching, because it's vulgar and ridiculous. That's the main thing I can say from it, and it's so different from our superhero genre stuff, other than The Boys, of course. That is definitely vulgar and brutal, where this is a weird, wacky, fun time. But also they deal with so much trauma and everything else. Like, I think they deal with those themes so well and also push the characters forward to move past it. And I continue to love what they're doing with this show. It just really sucks that this is the final season and we won't be getting any more of it, but maybe the characters will come back in the new DCU and James Gunn will bring back these actors, because I feel like these actors do a great job in their roles and I would love to see them again. So with that, let's jump into the episode 7 breakdown. And the way we're going to structure this is we'll go over the intro of the episode and then go into each kind of character group, because they definitely did split off into different sections and dealt with different plot until meeting up all at the end. And they did that for both episodes. So we'll go through the characters in their groups and then we'll talk about the end. So of course, episode 7 is going to start off right where episode 6 ended, with the group being captured by the Scissormen and Rita and Rouge being stuck in the ant farm, where it was kind of funny the way they escaped, because Rouge turned into a suitcase and Rita was in her. Super weird. They were just let out of the ant farm without a problem. I mean, the soldiers did recognize the suitcase as someone, so just a very weird and interesting plot point because they got out with no problem. And then with Vic, Cliff, Jane, and Derek being captured by the Scissormen, I thought it was gonna be like a way bigger deal, but Derek literally just drew a rock and dropped it on them and said, "Rock beats scissors." Funny reference, and I think that is just a great way to say that we have the Scissormen and they were beat by rock. I mean, it works, but I was still surprised that it ended that quickly. However, by the end of it, it definitely kind of brought all that full circle and we're like, oh shit, stuff's going down now. Now we'll start with the Rita and Madame Rouge storyline because that kind of part was a little bit short, but it was very self-contained within the Doom Patrol house. And I love when they got back to the house because one of my favorite parts from this section is the fact that they found the note from Cliff and it literally just tells them that they went to Orqwith to get Jane's longevity back, but they literally just walked the last person with longevity into a trap. Not really thinking that much, and pretty much in the end, it did give up Cliff's longevity because they walked him into a trap right to the enemy who needed what they had. Instead of keeping Cliff at a safe distance so that they couldn't get it, they just handed it up no problem. Especially because Cliff has absolutely no self-control. They were destined to lose. And we'll get back more into that when we get to that storyline. During the Rita and Madame Rouge thing, we did get a kind of funny reference to Walt Disney because Rouge is talking about how Wally is a creepy Walt Disney because of all the drawings he has. They had a bunch of random little references to different people in real life, which I think was just funny because it pokes fun where there wasn't a lot of like references I noticed from comics these last two episodes, but they did poke fun at people we actually know in real life. Now, this whole section led into really good moments between Madame Rouge and Rita, and I talked about it in the review where they had their similarities between the two sides, where Rita always failed at everything, and then Madame Rouge never had anything go right for her, which they're pretty similar. They're both ending in failure, where nothing goes right for one person, where the other person tries and fails constantly, and that's where Madame Rouge turns around and says, well, I'd rather fail at trying rather than succeed at doing nothing, which I think is just a big thing to show them being heroes, has been like, you know what? Being heroes doesn't mean you're always going to win. You're going to lose, but it's trying that matters. And that also makes you a good person because you're still putting in the effort. It's easy to succeed at doing nothing, but it's hard to succeed trying to do something. And I really like how they made them better friends too, because they talk about all the shit they've gone through and they got really drunk doing it, of course. And that also just led into some fun scenes where Rita talks about not really being sad about killing Wally, the sleazy producer, or the Brain, which as a hero, you should feel bad about some killing, but not all heroes have that super high moral ground where they still want to save people, but they don't mind getting their hands dirty sometimes. And I like how she's able to connect to Rouge with that because Rouge was a villain. She wasn't someone who saved lives all the time. So they're able to kind of connect on that part, but they also apologize as friends and kind of move past their difficulties. Also just having a fun drunk time while hanging out in the Doom Patrol house, building Wally's creepy portal with a skeleton was a fun moment. Especially when they go through and they're like, oh, we forgot the alcohol, and they bring the cart of alcohol with them. But that'll lead right into the ending. So let's go into now Jane and Cliff's storyline because that actually had a lot of importance to their characters as well. Because like I said in the review part of this video, Cliff is continuing to be super selfish. He's only thinking of his grandson and how he needs to be there for him. Instead of thinking, oh, you know, save the people who care about me, that are around me all the time, my family, because that's what the Doom Patrol are. They are his family. But he doesn't really see it that way at times. He only sees his daughter and his grandson, even though he wasn't really in his daughter's life ever. I know he's trying to be a better person. He's trying to be with his daughter because he never got to before. He's not really thinking about the world either, because if something goes wrong, that dream of him being with his daughter and his grandson is going down the toilet because the world's going to end. But he gets sucked into the dream, which is something that he always does. He's never really not fallen for this kind of thing. I thought he might have been moved past it at this point, but I think it's going to take everything that's happened to him now to kind of move past that part of it. But it was funny to watch them use Cliff's brain as like the hostage to threaten the longevity so that Jane could get hers back and save Larry. Yeah, that failed in the end, of course, because Cliff just gave in right away. Ultimately, right after Wally said he can give him what he wants, and they touch the longevity pendant that Niles had, and it brings him into this like weird dimension where he's in a world with his daughter and his grandson. And before he gets to touch his grandson, it cuts back to them. But funny enough, that scene had Jane holding a jar of pickles still, and I don't understand how she took the jar of pickles out of that kind of like dream state reality thing, because they never really explained if it was another reality or if it was like a dream state kind of showing Cliff what he wanted. I like how she threw the pickle at Wally. It was just a good moment. But during these fun scenes here, we did get some pretty cool references through Jane, of course. We got R2 Dipshit, which is R2-D2, Tin Man, which is just the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, and we got George R.R. Dickbag, which is George R.R. Martin. We also got another reference to Peanut the Farting Donkey, which we did see at season 1, and we've seen it sprinkled throughout the entire show. To sum it up real quick, Cliff's part was just super selfish, and instead of thinking about Jane, who cares about him and even pointed out, like, I care about you, he just thought of himself and his grandson, which if he was thinking of his grandson, he'd probably want to try to save the world first. But with that, let's move into the other section of the storyline with Derek and Vic, because they had a fun fight. Derek draws Cyborg's arm cannon, which was cool, and uses it and acts like a superhero, where Vic gets a flaming green sword, which was pretty sick. I don't know what that reference was. I tried to look up like green flaming sword and I couldn't really find anything, but I think this moment too really showed Derek what his friend is like as a hero. Seeing him smile and know that being a hero is what Vic's supposed to be, even if it's not Cyborg. Even stating that back home, Vic was their Superman, but Vic was still like really offhandish because he's like, that's not me. I don't want to be that. All I ever saw when I looked in the mirror was loss. My mom's death. I lost my friends, someone he didn't recognize after the accident, which is something they really dove deep into in the show with how Vic saw himself as Cyborg, because even though he was this huge superhero, he always had this traumatic loss in him. He always saw that traumatic experience that turned him into the monster he believed he was. And I also like how he pointed out that he couldn't go back to see his friends because he couldn't even face himself. So how could he face the people he cares about with the way he looked? That's just a big thing with him. Even having Derek apologize, because they had that big conflict at the beginning of the season where his friends were like, you're just a superhero, you know, you don't really understand what we've been through when you left and all that stuff. But Derek, by the end of this, seems to really understand where Vic is coming from and understands what happened to his friend, which I think is a great moment, helping Vic kind of move past his trauma with his friends as well and pushing him into a new light. Also a fun moment with them when they find Larry. Derek's like, come with us if you want to live, which is a Terminator reference with
come with me if you want to live.
But that wraps up the three main storylines of that episode, which in episode 7, there's a little bit less to cover compared to episode 8, which there was so much more because there was so much info dumping for the character development. But the ending for episode 7 was interesting, and I feel like it probably would have been better if they didn't drop both episodes on the same day and we waited a week to have that, because they definitely left on a cliffhanger ending. That would have been interesting to see if we had to wait a week, like, oh shit, we have to wait a week for this cliffhanger, rather than, oh, it's revealed right after, because we get to watch the next episode directly after this one. However, episode 8 definitely did have a good cliffhanger, but before we get all into that, let's talk about that ending to episode 7. Cliff did drink the Kool-Aid, and he gave up his longevity. That was the main thing, and I've been talking about this entire time. And the one thing that was kind of interesting during this scene was the fact that he said, I'm putting a whole lot of faith into nothing, and looking at his hand saying, but I'm doing it for you, Rory. And then his hand being like, are you? Which definitely makes me think that his subconscious inside is realizing that he's being super selfish and that he's doing it for himself and not Rory. So I like how that's kind of his brain playing tricks on him, because it's definitely been doing that for this whole season with everything going on with his aging brain. And I think that's really interesting, showing that this is probably like the stepping stone for Cliff finally realizing he has to stop being selfish. Then we have Madame Rouge and Rita just kind of stumbling into the laboratory, I guess we'd call it, drunk and saying they're there, but they're super late because they've already stolen their longevity. And it's just a funny moment because they just walk in drunkenly, no security notices them, and they have the cart of alcohol with them, which was just a good moment. And then Jane tries to save Cliff, but before she gets blasted, she gets saved herself by Space Case and Abigail. Wasn't expecting them to show up in Orqwith there, so that was a cool little moment of them being heroes, and also just tying them back to the rest of the Doom Patrol plot, because we haven't seen them since they got introduced this season. And then Vic putting bubbles around everyone as like protective shields, because when Immortus rises, who's Isabel Feathers, Rita's arch nemesis that we first got introduced to back in Space Patrol way back when. That was someone I wasn't expecting to see. We did see her earlier this season when she was stuck in the time stream, so that was an interesting moment where this character comes back out of nowhere, and then she screams and the episode ends. So interesting end to that episode, and again, I still think that this probably would have hit a little bit more if they didn't have episode 8 come out directly after it. But because episode 8 did, let's talk about it now. We're jumping to the breakdown, same thing, different stories, but let's jump into the intro for that part. So of course, the episode picks up directly after everything, where Orqwith is now destroyed. Everything around it is absolutely decimated after Isabel's scream, and the Doom Patrol has officially released Immortus. Of course, the good guys messing up like they always do. And then they end up back in the real world. People find out they saved Isabel because she's a big name, apparently, that's been missing for so long, and everyone's so happy that she's returned. They rose Immortus, but I feel like Immortus definitely took over her body. But we'll talk about that in a second, because then we also had a really good moment with Derek leaving because he has to go see his family. He calls an Uber. He's like, yeah, Vic, I got a family to go to, and even telling him he should be Cyborg again, but not the same old Cyborg he was before, which means Vic just needs a new way to get into the suit. Dude can get some gear. He doesn't need to be mechanical, but he can get gear put on himself to be that superhero because he loves to do it. That's the thing. This whole season has kind of been pushing Vic into this role to being a hero again because he stepped back because he didn't think that was him, but it really is. He just needs to do it in a different way, which I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes by the end of the season, because there is only a few episodes left and the show's not continuing after this, so I really hope we do see him get a good hero moment before the season ends. Let's talk about Isabel Immortus, because I feel like that's the major plot point in this episode, and there's so much to talk about just from this. Because throughout this episode, they definitely focus on her wanting all this fame and glory, which seems to be more what Isabel Feathers wants rather than Immortus, which I think Immortus is controlling her. However, they are also being manipulated by Isabel Feather's thoughts, because she wants to be famous, she wants to be well known. And the first time we notice this is when they're on the news there. She talks about being stuck in the time stream, watching civilizations fall and rise, and then saying death was just an illusion. But then reverses all of it, because when she does that, her voice got deeper, and she definitely looked evil. And I think the first thing that happens is to point out that Madame Rouge can sense something has changed, because she kind of says, oh, that was deja vu. That was kind of weird. Every time Immortus reverses time during this entire episode, she realizes it. No one else does but her. So kind of pointing out that Rouge might be the secret weapon to figuring out what's going on. It seems like Isabella Immortus knows Rouge can sense this, because she stops time at one point, talks directly to Rouge, tells her to tell Rita to back off or she will kill her, because Rita was taking all the fame at the moment. And I think that kind of points out that she does know that Rouge can sense it. And in the comics, Immortus doesn't have any power, so this is one of those changes, but it does seem like a hint to their comic book origin, because in the comics, Immortus has a genius level intellect, has amassed knowledge of chronophysics, which is time travel. Instead of her being an expert in that, he's able to reverse time, because they definitely make him seem more like an omnipotent character in this. So that's why I think that he took over Isabel's body while she was stuck in the time stream. He used her body to constitute himself back in this world, which is really interesting. And I'm really curious to see what happens when going forward, because Madame Rouge definitely seems like the secret weapon, because she can see the reverse time. But Immortus also seems like the character that's going to keep reversing time every time they do something that's out of character and seemingly evil, to hide that true identity from the world, especially because she wants all the attention, and the Doom Patrol keeps taking all of it, and it just continuously gets worse as the episode goes down. But the fact that we're on episode 8 and Immortus is kind of already showing their face of what's going down, it really means that episode 9, 10, 11, and 12 are going to get real quick, because we also have to deal with the zombie butt storyline, because now the zombie butt is running amok, which maybe Immortus might play a role in stopping the apocalypse, because they can reverse time. So we'll see what happens going forward. Now, after this Immortus stuff, let's talk about Cliff, because I think he had a really important scene with Abigail this episode, which really showed where she is and where he is. Because of Cliff's longevity now being away, he's aging rapidly, meaning his Parkinson's coming in, meaning he's starting to get affected by that old age that was already troubling him. And I love how Abigail tries to give him Niles' chair. And his first response is like, oh, because everyone hated Niles and everyone hates me, that's why you want to give me the chair? It's like, bro, she's just trying to help you. Like, take the seat and get help. But he continues to self-sabotage himself by being super mean to Dorothy and just not letting anyone take care of him. And I love how she points out that they care about him. She wants to help him because he's family, and he just blows it off because all he can think about is that he doesn't deserve the help, that he's a piece of shit. And I think this is just a big character moment for him, where he has to realize that he can accept help. There's people that care about him, and I really am interested into his story the most, because I want to see that self-sabotaging behavior go away and him to grow into this hero role, because that's kind of what he needs to do. And he needs to learn how to live his life, even though he probably will end up sacrificing himself in this world with these people that are kind of not his family by blood, but his family by everything else. Also, he just completely misses the point when there's the parade, because instead of going to be with his friends, he's like, oh, we're gonna go to a parade where everyone's celebrating me as a hero? Yeah, let's go. All Dorothy was trying to do was point out that he should spend the time that he has left with the people he cares about. But instead, he's like, oh, people are gonna be celebrating me. Those people care about me. Let's go there. So definitely some stuff for him to overcome and be better for. Now with that, let's jump into the space case and Jane's storyline, because Jane also had a similar problem where she was only really thinking about herself and not accepting help from Casey, especially because Casey for the first time is dealing with grief after her father died, which I think was really interesting. This character pulled out of a comic book has to learn how to live with emotions that she never had before. Even though we are not going to have her for long, it's still interesting to see her go through this, and it kind of sucks that we're not getting another season, because I would love to see more of her interact with the Doom Patrol in another season. So I like how her goal was helping Jane. She saw Jane needing help because Jane couldn't find her way through the underground. Her train station wasn't there, and she was having a hard time connecting with her other personalities. And somehow Casey was in there with her for a second, which could be because she's a comic book character and was pulled out of a book that she was able to be pulled into that. So I'm thinking that has why she's able to be tied to it, especially when Casey put all the puzzle pieces into piles. And for Jane, all those puzzle pieces were gray. Casey separated them by color. And I also think that those puzzle pieces are Jane's way of getting back into the underground, and she needs to put them together to realize what's going on. So I think Casey is definitely the key to helping Jane out, and I'm curious to see how their relationship will grow. Jane in the end does go and apologize and invites Casey to the parade because she kind of feels bad realizing that Casey wants to help. Jane's kind of overcoming and trying to be a better person as well, and she's continued to do that. She definitely has done some selfish stuff in the past, but I definitely see her being a better character overall after this season. So it's gonna be interesting to see that storyline. Like, each character has a major storyline they have to deal with, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how everyone goes forward. And then we also had Larry and Rama's storyline, where Larry was able to reconstitute him using the radiation. They have their definite intention going on, but Larry has to learn to live in this world as well. Rather than being locked away, he has to step outside and live. But they also have a bunch of problems of their own to deal with. So the ending of this episode definitely set up a bunch, which we're about to dive into right now, because we had Rita sitting with Vic talking about how one day he won't need the Doom Patrol, showing that it's not big enough for him. He's a huge hero. He deserves to be in a team like the Justice League or the Teen Titans. They never specifically said that, but that is kind of where he belongs. He doesn't really belong within the Doom Patrol, which he never really has. My first thought was Titans, which I feel like if both shows were taking place in the same universe, he would have definitely moved his way over to that show if they were both to continue on, which is why it was cool to have him in that crossover for Titans season 4. We had Rouge call out Isabel as being Immortus, which had Immortus lose her shit and get mad at Rouge for calling her her true name and then reversing time. So showing that Madame Rouge does know that Immortus is Immortus and that something darker is going down. The Doom Patrol has their fun float with the farting donkey, which is just classic. Again, kind of going back to season 1 where they had the farting donkey in the town and the Doom Patrol facing them off. Parade also had a blob balloon for Rita after Rita almost destroyed the town back in season 1. Again, more weird stuff connecting back to the first season with how these characters weren't seen as heroes before, but now they are. Out of everything they've done, bringing back Isabel Feathers was their hero accomplishment to turn them into a hero, which makes really no sense, but that is definitely this world and how it works. Each character has their own problem, and they just all announce it at the same time. Jane can't get into the underground. Cliff says the butt zombie has escaped, and they have to deal with it now. Larry and Mr. 104 are destabilizing, and once they do, could cause a big reaction, which would not be good for the world. Which I think is just everyone dumping their big problems on everyone all at the same time, and then Immortus is now pissed off because the Doom Patrol are getting all the attention that she screams once again after she snaps. Most likely destroying the town. I think that's how the episode is going to start next week, is that Immortus has destroyed the town around everyone and is going to be going after Doom Patrol, which it kind of makes me wonder if Immortus will be the final big bad for this season, or if the big bad will end up being the Butt Apocalypse. Because right now, they're already kind of diving in deep into Immortus snapping and losing their shit, that I feel like the Butt Apocalypse might be the big bad that ends the season, which would be a classic Doom Patrol move, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next episode, because there's definitely some interesting stuff coming from this. That was a lot to talk about, but I definitely think this episode did a great job at character building, setting up all the problems and what they have to go forward to fix them, giving us some Immortus, setting up how big of an antagonist they are, and also showing their power to a sense, because there's still a lot we don't know about the character, and they also just kind of have a weird omnipotent ability where they can control everything around them. Dark clouds were coming in, kind of showing that ominous feeling and setting a dark tone. So I am really interested to seeing how this episode goes further into the season, how they wrap up the final one. And I don't know if the season was meant to be the final one originally, so I'm kind of curious to see how it all ends. Is it going to end on a cliffhanger where it's like, oh, you know, if we had to season 5, this is what was going to happen, or is it going to end as just a wrap up with the team being superheroes rather than being just misfits in the background? But I am looking forward to it. Let me know, were there any Easter eggs or details that I might have missed during these 2 episodes, because after watching it, I definitely feel like there were some that I might have been oblivious to. I did watch it at 5 a.m., so maybe that's the problem. And let me know what you thought about its return, and what story point out of all these were you most interested in. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my DC breakdowns, as well as my Marvel ones, because I also will have Loki ones coming out at the same time as this one. So thanks you all for watching this extra long video, and if you stayed to the end, let me know down in the comments as well, because I want to see who watched it all the way to the end. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you next week when we watch another episode of Doom Patrol.